morning, good afternoon, good evening. The biggest liability to South Africa's prosperity is ANC. Insisted Prince Mashele, a South African analyst and author of with a growing reputation. I think the people of Zimbabwe have to sit up and pay attention to what he's saying. Because Zimbabwe and South Africa have got a lot in common. These two nations were ruled by white colonialists, probably the longest in the region, longest for South Africa, and second longest for Zimbabwe. And we gained our independence after a protracted and bitter war of liberation. The two countries is the same. Zimbabwe has to be ruled by Zanu PF, the party that spearheaded the liberation war. In South Africa, since its independence in 1994, has been ruled by ANC, the party that also spearheaded the liberation war. Ever since the two countries were an upper middle income nation at the time of independence. But ever since their independence, the two countries have been in economic decline. Same as applied in Zimbabwe as in South Africa. And so some of the problems that have made ANC the biggest liability for that country's prosperity in South Africa are equally true for Zimbabwe. Albeit in the case of Zimbabwe, we have to say Zanu PF is the biggest liability to our survival. Forget economic prosperity, survival. Zanu PF and their MDC Triple C sidekick. So whatever we can learn from South Africa, we should. Here is what Prince was saying regarding South Africa. And I think it's worth listening. I'll play only a part of it. I won't play all of it.
I don't know what sins I've committed to deserve this.
But we all love being right, but sometimes it's painful to be right.
I hate it. I hate it because I have been trying to warn the country for many years. And in fact, when I started back in 2009, around that period, I actually was treated like a pariah.
I remember.
Yeah, I was insulted. Even in my village in Bushbuckridge, by the way, people who go to my mother and say, has your son become mad? Please talk to your son. But everything that I warned the country about has come to pass. But let's just forget about me and focus on the country. This is where we are, Bongani. The biggest liability for South Africa today is the African National Congress, the ANC. No people who scream and they want to jump out of their cars, but I'll tell you the truth. Over a period of time, there are two categories of human beings that have realized that the ANC is an instrument and a source of enrichment. Two categories. Category number one, incompetence. So if you are incompetent, you have no skill somewhere in a community, the quickest way to find a job in a municipality or in government, you join the African National Congress and you attend a few meetings with comrades and you get a job. So that's the first category. The second, so that category is not as dangerous because they just want jobs. The second category is the most dangerous category of human beings, criminals. Criminals have realized if you want to make big money in the state, you bribe an ANC politician and you will eventually take over the state and run it, and you will be the king of tenders. That is where we are. So, and the ANC is the easiest route into state resources. So you will never fix South Africa if you don't remove the ANC from the center of the state. The ANC has broken the state and it has broken our society. That's the summary of it.
The difficulty with putting all of this at the door of one party, one organization, is, if anything, last year told us voters are looking elsewhere. We may not like the ANC today because of some of the reasons you've pointed out, but how certain are we that what is to come next isn't even worse?
No, we're not certain, because you see, there are two political parties on the opposition side of things that are parading as alternatives to the ANC. That is the EFF and Umkhonto weSizwe. These two political parties are actually the ANC. We know them. Look at their leaders. You will see they come from these are factions that have broken out of the ANC. So the ANC cancer is there in Umkhonto weSizwe. So Umkhonto weSizwe, the day they take over KwaZulu-Natal, I pray that God helps that province. The day the EFF take over South Africa, if they were to take over South Africa, I can tell you it will be the perpetuation of the same thing. Look at the history of Julius Malema, by the way, and Limpopo and tenders. So the ANC is not just the fragment that is left in the Tula House. Even Umkhonto weSizwe and the EFF are part of the ANC, and they are as rotten as that what remains in Umkhonto weSizwe.
What?
I'll stop it there. There can be no doubt that in Zimbabwe, we are in serious trouble. When the country gained its independence in 1980, we were an upper middle income nation. We took great pride in that we were able to grow enough not only to feed the nation, but to be the breadbasket of the region. An accolade that we have since lost. Since Zanu PF launched into its land redistribution in 2000, Zimbabwe quickly lost that ability. We not only were failing to produce enough to feed ourselves, we had nothing left for export, which was a big foreign currency earner. We started as an upper middle income nation with a GDP per capita of about $6,000 US. Today, our GDP per capita has dropped to a mere $2,000 US per capita. millions of Zimbabweans are living in abject poverty. South Africa has suffered the same consequences under ANC rule. Country was an upper middle income nation. Yes, it has remained an upper middle income nation. But nonetheless, their GDP per capita has dropped. There's no doubt about it. And what Prince is talking about here is corruption. Corruption in ANC has been rampant. There's no denying that either. In Zimbabwe, we have our own corrupt individuals. We have grown incredibly rich. They are forever splashing money on expensive cars and luxuries. If corruption was bad during Mugabe's time, it has gone into overdrive under Mnangagwa. Zimbabwe's health system, education system have all but collapsed. And surprise, surprise, many Zimbabweans are going to South Africa for basic healthcare services. This is a tragic picture of a woman. Many believe she was a Zimbabwean woman who was not allowed to use the healthcare services in South Africa, and so ended up giving birth just outside one of the hospitals. She is sitting there in a pool of blood, a newborn child on her lap. This is what I'm talking about when I say Zimbabwe's healthcare, education have all but collapsed. The solutions to Zimbabwe's problems and South Africa's problems are the same. Prince is talking of South Africa will never recover until the people of South Africa bite the bullet and get rid of ANC. They began to do that looking at last year's elections. Since 1994, ANC had always won the majority. But for the first time last year in the 2024 election, ANC lost its majority. It was still the main party, but it had lost its majority. I would like to draw the parallel here. I think South Africa is luckier than we are, because South Africa had the great fortune of having visionary leaders like the late Nelson Mandela. The greatest legacy that Nelson Mandela has left the people of South Africa is that the country had strong democratic institutions. And they've managed to retain their independence to this day. Things like the police, the judiciary, the media, and so on and so forth. Zimbabwe, we did not have that luck. When Mugabe got into power in 1980, he set about to systematically corrupt all the state institutions for the purposes that they will be serving Zanu PF's agenda of staying in power at all costs. And so Zimbabwe, for us to remove our biggest liability to the country's very survival, we have to implement the democratic reforms and restore the independence of those various key institutions like ZEC, the police, the army, including the opposition itself. There is no denying that Zimbabwe's opposition has been so badly compromised. What we are looking at really is Zanu PF, Team B, in all but name. It can be done. In fact, we have to do it. The country had the golden opportunity to implement those reforms during the 2008 to 2013 GNU. Unfortunately, Morgan Tsvangirai and his MDC friends sold out. Mugabe bribed them with the trappings of high office, and they forgot about the reforms. They failed to implement even one token reform. That is the reality. So in many ways, the greatest liability to Zimbabwe's survival, forget economic or political prosperity, survival, are Zanu PF and their surrogate opposition, MDC Triple C sidekick. There can be no doubt that MDC selling out during the GNU has enabled Zanu PF dictatorship to survive and thrive. Some people have been under the mistaken belief that to end the Zanu PF dictatorship, we needed to confront Zanu PF and forget about MDC Triple C. What they're forgetting to remember is that when MDC was formed in 1999, its task was to implement the democratic changes to dismantle the Zanu PF dictatorship. And hence they called themselves the Movement for Democratic Change. Zimbabwe's opposition is not the opposition as in other countries. Their number one task has been and still remains to implement the reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. The very fact that Zanu PF has bribed Morgan Tsvangirai and company to forget about the reforms does not change that their number one task still remains to implement reforms. The only problem now is, of course, while the ordinary people still believe and trust that MDC-CCC would implement the reforms, the reality is MDC-CCC leaders have moved on. They've now been participating in flawed elections, knowing fully well the process is flawed, and knowing fully well by participating they're giving Zanu PF legitimacy. They participated because they also knew that Zanu PF was giving away a few gravitrans seats to entice the opposition to keep participating. And the people's failure to read the writing on the wall is one of the reasons why Zimbabwe has been stuck all these years. 2028 is an opportunity to deny Zanu PF political legitimacy by making sure that the opposition supporters do not participate in those flawed elections in their millions, as they've done in the past. If we can get our people to do that, we will get a second GNU and a second bite at the cherry to implement the democratic reforms to ensure free, fair, and credible elections. Because only then do we have a realistic chance of finally ending this Zanu PF dictatorship. Think about it. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.